Tom, with the lack of confidence in our electronic voting machines, would you ever consider returning to a paper ballot for the City of Lakeway elections? Why or why not?
Well, at least we're spared not having to do the 2-minute stand-up. Okay, so as the mayor, it's something to consider, but it's not an individual decision of the mayor, it's a decision of the council. There is no impractical reason that the city could not return to paper ballots for city elections. The problem with returning to paper ballots isn't the election, it's record preservation as dictated by the state legislature. So we have 10 days of early voting and then election day. So you would have to have 10 double sealed ballot boxes, and then you would have to have 10 double sealed ballot boxes for any runoff election. So you'd have to have 20 ballot boxes. Then after 60 days of preserving the records, you would be able to take the paper records and store them in a larger container by precinct. And I think we have 3 or 4 precincts in the city, and each ballot then has to be segregated by precinct. They have to be double sealed and double locked. The people who would do that are the city secretary and assistant city secretary, Joanne Touchstone, and the administrative assistant, Mary Martinez. They can handle all that. Then the problem you have is, where for the next 2 years and the 2 years after that do you store 40 to 80 boxes of ballots, paper ballots? Luckily, I thought through that. We have a jail at the police station that's completely unusable. We built a jail that can't be used because the legislature changed the rules on jails. So we have a jail at the police station that has 4 highly secured cells. Each cell is double locked and controlled by video, so it meets the state requirements for record preservation. And I asked Chief Cohen the other day, I said, I think I found a use for your jail if we decide to go back to paper ballots. And he laughed and admitted that yes, it did meet the state requirements. But we could do it if the council introduced it. We'd have to survey the residents, ask if they want to go back to paper ballots, and then we could acquire the equipment. We spend $40,000 on an election at Travis County, and probably you'd spend the first $35,000, $40,000 just buying the equipment and taking care of it. But it's doable, but it's not a unilateral decision. And it's something that, if you just think about the logistics, it's possible, but the problem isn't casting the ballot, it's keeping the ballot available through general scrutiny for the next 2 years and the 2 years after that that's required. So thank you.
Is it the same question or?
Same question.
Okay, just making sure. You know, I understand why the question's being asked, and I just don't think, and I'm sad that the United States of America, we have to be challenged with this position. Fundamentally speaking, this country takes voting very seriously, and we should safeguard and make sure that the ballots are counted correctly, and that measure is entrusted to the Secretary of State. And I think what Mayor Kilgore was just saying is the chain of custody is extremely important, and we do have some limitations associated with paper ballots. I think there are probably better solutions than maybe just a standard paper ballot system. I think maybe even getting a receipt, when you do vote, something that you could back test and validate at a later date. I think the only thing Tom maybe missed in his explanation is I think that the ballot's got to be secured for 22 months, after the election, and that's federal and state law. So I think the chain of custody needs to be evaluated. But again, if council and the city and the residents, want us to focus our time and attention on that, I would definitely be up to the challenge.
Thank you. Okay, Tom, you're going to go first. Okay, Ron. Biden announced last week that we should all prepare for the second pandemic. If mask mandates or forced business closures returned due to a future pandemic, knowing what we all know now, would you vote to stand against a Travis County order and risk the alleged consequences?
I think U.S. citizens are done being bullied by our government. The health and the decisions should be managed by Texans and not by our government. I think the mask mandates should be managed at the business level And I don't think our government should be imposing restrictions on us in that way.
Thanks, Ron. The subject is fairly straightforward. I think we discovered that post-pandemic, most of the analysis and use of masks has proven to be flawed through the data. So I would be highly suspect of any mandates coming forward. I think you're not going to see mandates of that type in any type going forward. I think you might see them try, but I don't see the general population agreeing to them. And as a matter of fact, I was the guy who opened the city immediately after election. We were not scheduled to have a Memorial Day service because Travis County and the state had not yet opened up, and I made the unilateral decision to open the city and conduct Memorial Day, whether we had permission or not. So that's my record on that.
Okay, so I'm saying hypothetically, Travis County says close your businesses and enforce masks.
No,
Okay.
it's easy. No. They tried that before. That did not work. No.
Okay, good. Okay. Mayor Kogel, you go first. Lake Travis ISD Elementary 8 is planned for Bee Creek Road. It will forever be a commuter school and serve Sweetwater, a neighborhood outside of Lakeway. If the city grants the ordinance waivers, what are the positive and negative outcomes if the school is permitted to build on Bee Creek Road?
Okay, so we just did this, and the city council unanimously voted 7-0 to deny the waivers and deny the development agreement. As a matter of background, no elected official from the Board of Trustees contacted the city to advocate for the development agreement or the location of the school. No elected official came forward to talk about why the need was great. So that's a real gap. The discussion occurred between staff levels, and it was mostly on highly technical things like variances. Rough Hollow already has a 40-foot retaining wall, so would you approve a 40-foot retaining wall at elementary school 8? That's a technical question. The answer was yes. So every time you ask a technical question and you get an answer yes, the school district facilities engineers were believing that they were getting city acquiescence. When the property was presented first to the development subcommittee, we were under the impression that the school district was going to connect the two properties, that they would be one big property together linking back to one traffic light, not a second new traffic light making things worse for everyone. So the downside is you could put a school there, and then for the next 35 years, everyone who lives in Rough Hollow or Greater Lakeway who wishes to go to 71, or everyone from 71 who wishes to go into RM 620 or Lakeway would have a horrific traffic jam for about 3 hours a day in the morning because of the timing of elementary drop-off and then middle school drop-off. Then you'd have the same thing in the afternoon. That was made clear to the school district immediately. And they were told in no uncertain terms that that traffic light would never go there. They needed to find a different plan. They told us, well, if we don't approve it next week, then the school will be delayed by a full year. So they basically told they gave the city council a take it or leave it proposition, which 7 members of the city council said, you are not listening to us. We are protecting our residents. And so the benefit would have been you would have a school. It would have helped the residents of the Sweetwater community, our neighbors, and it would have reduced some of the overcrowding at Rough Hollow Elementary. It would have, however, created a traffic jam for 30 years. And that was not a trade-off that the council unanimously thought was worthwhile. And so that's what happened. Subsequently to that, the trustees of the school district finally asked for a meeting, and 3 members of the school district attended a meeting with their staff with 3 members of council. Got to be careful about those quorum rules. And there was a meeting in which it was revealed that because the school was delayed a year, the school district would consider rezoning, and then they had to do a new demographic study. And as a result, it was likely that that property would not be applicable with the new demographic study, that the new demographic study would say the school should be built on 71, which was the city's point all along. And I think the members of the council who were at that meeting were genuinely shocked to learn that the alternative plan was not to build the school there at all, it was to go somewhere else. And so we felt like that was a tacit admission that we had clearly made the right choice for the 22,000 residents of the city of Lakeway.
You know, naturally that, and it currently still is a huge issue. You know, sometimes it's not about, you know, the solutions or what we find as an answer. It's more about how we get there. And how we got there was not in the order of operations that I feel is reasonable of Lakeway residents. You know, the way that we attacked the superintendent, telling them that his math was wrong. We've got to, as a city, participate very humbly and respectfully in public. And if there's issues that we need to be addressed, we need to do that behind closed doors. And these actions only give us a black eye and really breaks down the relationships that we have with our external partners. Does the school go there? As Tom said, you know, no, currently there's 7 council members that all voted collectively together. It probably will never go there. But more importantly than some of the solutions or the answers is how we get to the part of the equation. And we've got to do that in a humble and respectful manner. And that's what I think is more important sometimes than the answer.
Okay, so I appreciate what you just said, but the question is, if the waivers were granted and the school was built there, what are the positive and negatives of it being built on Bee Creek Road?
You know, the positives is just as the mayor said, you know, we've got overcrowding issues. We've got stress that are being put on our students. I've got 2 daughters in the school district. We've got stresses being put on our teachers. You know, the internal stresses are magnified and weighted against the external stresses of the traffic and the issues that it's going to put on the city as a whole. And so, you know, balancing those issues, you know, it's a tough task. And, you know, that fight's probably not over with. We have a lot of ground to cover. We've got a lot of discussions that we got to make as a city. And we got to do it in a reasonable way.
Thank you. Okay, in an effort to lead above reproach, would you be in favor of a city ordinance requiring recusal from votes that directly impact one of your major campaign donors? And if you need clarification, I can give that to you.
No, I think we already have a provision of our charter that speaks to this. You know, 1105. You know, it says that, you know, we cannot even have the presence or the opportunity for impropriety. And if impropriety is even, you know, a possibility, you know, we've got to establish that. And so, no, I think our charter is comprehensive in that statute.
Okay, so are you saying you would voluntarily recuse yourself from a vote that, if you're saying it's already in the ordinances, I was not aware. So would you voluntarily then disclose, hey, I have a conflict here, this would directly impact one of my major campaign donors, I'm gonna recuse myself from this vote?
If there was any evidence or any perceived evidence of impropriety, I will follow the ordinance and charter at all times.
See, I think actually those of us who've been doing the work of the Ethics Committee don't necessarily believe that that is actually the correct legal interpretation of that section. The Supreme Court has already ruled that money is speech and that people are allowed to support their candidates in whatever manner they see fit. So in that regard, just because somebody supports you is not an immediate reason for recusal. The charter and the ordinance refer to financial gain. Now, I think that we should have improved that, not weakened the ordinance as it turned out. And in that regard, I think that it is, if we wish to address campaign finance reform, which is clearly a valuable subject in this day and age, then that should be a fulsome discussion. And as a result of that, then there would be a discussion about recusal for major donors and what is a major donor. And I think that it's completely reasonable for, the residents to expect that just because somebody gave you a lot of money does not mean they get preferential seat at the table. See, before we had contested elections, people gave people the office and the quid pro quos were clear. Now we actually have to have an election that's contested and you can see who donates and you can see who supports what. So if we go through the process and we do campaign finance reform and we bring it forward, then I think that it's reasonable to say that I would recuse myself from my large donors' projects. I think that just on its face should be done. I've done 2 recusals while I've been on the dais so far, and I think several other members have done recusals at different points in time. We're probably under 5 recusals so far, but most of us don't have any business relationships in the city that would cause the current legal standard to come into effect. I think that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you. As a concern about censorship, would you be in favor of a city ordinance requiring disclosure of any social media accounts for which you are an administrator? Or would you be willing to give up your administrative authorization during campaign season?
So as to the first, I think transparency and sunlight are the best answer possible, and I've been saying that since I first started running for office. You have to be transparent, you have to talk about things. So if you are online and you have an active online presence and you control a page or a venue, or it could be anything. You know, if you have a business interest, say you were the owner of High Five, and you didn't allow certain gatherings for your opponents, but your own friends could go to High Five, you should have to disclose that, right? That would be it. So I would say that the disclosure comment is correct. As to the recusal, I'm going to disagree. I am a First Amendment absolutist. So if you're online and you have the ability to say something and you're doing it, you should yell to the top, from the top of the church to the top of the roof to the top of the school, that you are in favor of whatever or opposed to whatever. You should not have to stop your free speech. We've had several people during this campaign intimate that being online and being on city council were at odds with one another, or being online or being on a city committee and having somebody's yard sign is not compatible. We have clearly shown, and the Supreme Court has clearly ruled, that you do not lose your First Amendment rights just because you're in office. I have the right to say whatever I want, and I will defend to the death your right to say whatever you want in any forum you want. I will be an absolutist in that regard.
Okay, let me provide a little clarification. If you are an administrator of a social media account, a page, there have been allegations or the possibility that you have the literal power to cull comments, delete posts, that then could sway the readers of that page because they're not seeing everything that has been posted. So as a community, we might be interested in knowing, do you have that authorization to do that? And during campaign season, would you not be an administrator and therefore not be able to cull comments or delete posts?
Well, okay, that depends on the page.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, on the City of Lakeway Facebook pages, no comments are removed. It's an official government record. If I have for example, Mayor King has an official mayor's page, no comments can be removed. If you have a page, Lakeway Uncensored, that is your private room, just as this church room is your private room. If you are invited into someone's house and you misbehave, they may ask you to leave. That may seem that if you're in a really popular page, that is unfair, but those are the rules that you agreed to when you asked to join the page. So the difference is your private page, your private home versus a public one. Now I don't think it's the best interest to cull comments. So for example, there's a post I made on Nextdoor about going down to the state capitol to lobby for the city against taking away our zoning laws. It has 77 comments. About the last 30 of them are pretty freaking nasty, as you would say. But it's my page, my post. They're still there. They're still there. So it's, if you're there and you're not willing, and this is one of the big things. I think in public life, you live under a microscope. If you're not willing to be challenged and held to account for the words you say, and you're unwilling to answer the questions in public for the words you say, you are unfit for office. And those comments come at you, and some are good, and some are bad, downright nasty. But you know what? That's part of the job. That's why we get paid the big bucks.
Yeah, I don't get on social media very often, you know, and I know there's been some comments, concerns that are surrounding this topic. And again, I think, you know, the charter in 1105, again, with impropriety, if there is impropriety going on, or even the presence of impropriety, you know, I think we should address that. And, you know, if council members or candidates or city officials are intentionally using their public website to steer or to dilute, you know, the voice of somebody else, I think they should at least admit that, you know, they're doing it intentionally. I think there should be integrity in that. You know, I can get behind somebody that says I'm intentionally throttling or I'm intentionally censoring you. You know, what I can't get behind is people censoring and then saying, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, and I think we as a country and as a community should expect better of our residents and should expect better of our administrators of our public forums.
Thank you. Okay. What is one thing you would have done different than the council this year?
You know, that's a tough question. I'm not much of a couch quarterback kind of guy. You know, I think there's some initiatives that have been put forward, and I think we burned a lot of resources, and we didn't get any return on it. I don't think there's been a cost-benefit analysis to some of the agenda items that we've spent a lot of money and effort on. You know, I think a lot of our citizens could have been treated a little better. You know, Lewis is in the room here today. My daughter wanted to come to city council to see what was going on, and I called Lewis and I said, you know, is there anything going to set the mayor off today? You know, I don't want my 6-year-old or my 6th grade daughter and her friends to be subject to that. You know, and I think, you know, that's a thing that I wish, you know, didn't exist in our current ecosystem and our current culture. And, you know, I think that's one of our fundamental issues that we're dealing with right now.
Okay, Tom, before you start, I go to all the city council meetings, so I don't remember if there was a vote that you weren't in the majority, so I don't know if this question is even applicable to you.
Of course it is. There are
It is.
several. Oh,
Okay.
yes.
So
I've lost at least 3 votes.
Okay, pick one
Well, okay,
that you would have done different.
If I recall, your daughter did attend the meeting with her friend about the chicken.
I think that's what she wanted to ask you, was about a chicken.
Yeah. But she was there, and apparently I didn't lose my cool over a chicken.
Lewis assured me that you were going to be on your best behavior.
It's not like Lewis has any control.
No, I didn't.
Anyway.
I absolutely did not say that.
Okay, so anyway, so just to be clear, yes, I think the single vote that there are several votes that I disagree with. I think the largest vote that I disagree with is the watering down of the city ethics ordinance. I think that we were in a position where we had good responsible reporting so that you could not give a building inspector $200 and maybe make sure your permit got moved to the head of the line. Or that you couldn't you know, hand a gift card to a city employee at the activity center to make sure that your reservation got taken care of and somebody else's reservation was moved aside. So we actually thoroughly watered down the ethics rules, and that was a failure, and upon re-election I intend to revisit that along with probably campaign finance reform and some other things. But clearly watering down the ethics was, I think, the single biggest mistake the city made this last 2 years.
Okay, thank you. If anybody has questions, if you'll raise your hand, I'm gonna ask some short ones here and then we'll go to those. Okay, these are yes or no responses. We'll just do all 4 and then you can do all 4.
Sure.
Would you allow workforce housing in the city of Lakeway?
Yes.
Would you vote in favor of home daycares?
Yes.
Would you require further disclosure of 501c3 donations that give back to city employees?
Yes.
Would you allow commercial flights or flight school at the City of Lakeway Air Park?
No.
Okay. I'll restate them. Would you allow workforce housing in the city of Lakeway?
No.
Would you vote in favor of a home daycare?
No.
Would you require further disclosure of 501c3 donations that give back to city employees?
No.
Would you allow commercial flights or flight school out of the city of Lakeway Air Park?
No.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna try to read some writing now. If a large box store approaches Lakeway for a SUP for a piece of property on 71 at the edge of Lakeway and felt they also have an option to another property on 71 just outside of Lakeway, how would you vote? So you understand, they come in, a box store comes in, wants to put their store in the city of Lakeway, but they also have an alternative. What are your feelings about that? And
You know, is this similar to the Walmart situation? Yeah, I think my feelings are similar to what, you know, we experienced in the Walmart situation. You know, I think do you want a lengthy question, or is it?
well, not everybody knows what you mean when you say the Walmart situation, so yeah.
Okay. So Walmart, you know, wanted to build a store here, and the citizens, you know, got together and made sure that, you know, their voice was heard. And I think, you know, things of that nature would be very similar in current times.
So you would vote against a big box store inside the city of Lakeway boundaries?
I would.
Okay, Tom.
Exactly the opposite. So if I understand your question, they have the option to put the store inside the city limits or on property outside the city limits. Okay, so if they put the property, if they have the option to go into Travis County and they build it, then we get none of the tax revenue and all of the traffic. And that's really bad. That's a bad trade. If they come into the city on one of our commercial properties on 71, we get the traffic and the tax revenue. This is part of one of the projects that was started by former Mayor Cox to see if we couldn't attract a Costco or a large box store. Costco, as you know, is one of the largest growing corporations in the world. And I was looking the other day, and as of last year, the average Costco store is 146,000 square feet, which is larger than our HEB, but it earns $192 million in revenue a year. The city sales tax is 1.75%. 1.75% of 192 million is 3.35 million. So for those of you who are told there'd be no math tonight, I'm sorry, there's math. And 3.35 million is a large commercial revenue stream to provide for city services. Now, the way this has been done in most cities is the city council, the mayor, the development committee meet with a box store and they offer them a program of rebate where we would give them $10 million in sales tax relief, approximately the cost of building their building. And we would set a time limit that says you get $10 million or you get 1% of your revenue for the next 10 years. And that's the economic incentive to bring that facility, because then the city still gets 1.6 million of revenue that would be used to add the city services we need for the next 5 and 10 years. So simply put, were we to be on the cusp of having a large conglomerate come in and say, I can put it here inside the city limits with your help, or I can put it outside of 71 in Travis County and there's nothing you can do about it, I would be dragging them into the city limit with every ounce of power I had to get the tax revenue to go along with the traffic.
Okay, so as a follow-up to that, most of us, well, I believe that when government makes more money, they spend more money. So what would you propose? You gotta sell that to the taxpayers.
Well, okay, so the reason is, so you're gonna continue to grow. Right now we have 65-35 property tax, sales tax ratio. The longer we continue to keep our commercial sales tax revenues down, the more the residents pay for the taxes. Every one of us knows I have to add police officers. We have had our standard police force now for about the last 4 years, and you add police officers in 2s and 4s. So that means you're adding police officers in terms of about $220,000 or about $600,000. And that's what we need in order to maintain public safety and to control 71 and 620. You also have the fact that we can start buying down our bonds in 5 years to keep our credit rating as high as possible. We, as a city, have met the here and now. But if 10 years ago, our city fathers had been investing in parks for our growing and younger community, we'd have more parks. We would have had a larger police staff, not just a larger police building. So that's the issue, is you have to, the mayor doesn't think, the council really isn't supposed to be thinking about today. We're supposed to be thinking about 10 and 15 years from now, so that the folks behind us arrive and have the opportunities. And that's the reason I would say you bring it in here. And I know that the temptation is always that you're gonna spend more money, but we're a pretty fiscally conservative group. I mean, our reserves are $6 million, and if we didn't have that, we couldn't have picked up all the debris out there, because that went right into the reserves. We didn't have to raise anybody's taxes, and there are a whole lot of hardworking people in Lakeway who could not have taken a $2,500 to $3,000 hit to have their properties cleared from those trees. And the city made that, actually I made that decision on Thursday during the ice storm, before power had been restored. So that's where that came from.
Do you want to add anything? Just because,
Well, just to be clear, Tom does not hire police officers. You know, we hear a lot of first person singular from this guy, and it's a we. We as a city make decisions. We as a legislator make decisions. Tom is not an administrator. He has no administrative authority. That's solely invested in the executive authority of our city manager. And, you know, that's a big part of our issue here. You know, we go thinking this is an I, and not a we. And we have growth issues. We are at max capacity. You know, the thinking of the box stores, the thinking of all these grandiose ideas, you know, we should have been focusing on that maybe, you know, in the past. But now we have issues. We have traffic issues. We have infrastructure issues. We have other issues that money can't fix. And we've got a $6 million surplus. Clearly we're being fiscally conservative. We're doing the right things economically for our city. What we don't need is more traffic and more infrastructure issues that big box stores and those things bring to our city.
okay. Mayor Kilgore has stated that, to his surprise, the duties and responsibilities of the office are requiring his full-time attention. So, Ron, you already have a job, a full-time job. Where are you going to find the time and energy for what Mayor Kilgore considers something that needs full-time attention?
Yeah, I think the mayor spends a lot of time micromanaging and focused on things that aren't within, you know, the vested duties of the mayor. And so I think if we focused our time, you know, following the charter and following what a home rule city and a council managed structure does, I think the mayor would have a lot more time on his hands. You know, so I think bifurcating out the full-time position, you know, is an important thing to understand here. You know, we're a 22,000, 23,000 population city. There's a lot of home rule cities, council managed cities around us, like Round Rock, you know, very large compared to Lakeway. And they seem to have a mayor that, you know, also runs a full-time law office, doing a pretty good job over there. So I think, you know, the position that I can't manage my own company and also be the mayor is absolutely ridiculous.
And Tom, if you'll just explain
Well,
how
okay,
it's
so
become a
let
full-time
me be
job.
clear. I never said those things, Ron, so please don't put those words in my mouth. And so that's just the way it is. I have a view that this is a full-time job. Over the last 3 weeks, I've been down to the state capitol 3 times. We didn't have to used to do that. 10, 15 years ago, home rule cities were treated by the legislature with respect, and nobody tried to get into your dirt. We currently have people trying to end our ability to have municipal zoning. We have a bill in front of the legislature to have Lakeway have 1,400 square foot lots for mini homes. We have a rule in front of the legislature right now to end our ETJ and the ability to have compatible properties be annexed and zoned into the city. And the council sets policies and gets way involved in the details. The city manager runs the city. That's absolutely correct. But the city manager, assistant city manager, and all the other representatives look to your elected officials to take opinions from the residents and give them guidance. Sir, what does this mean? What does it mean to have a business tax review? What does it mean to have policing on 620 versus interior of the city of Lakeway? Those are all questions where the mayor is giving advice, guidance, and exercising leadership. There is no micromanagement. We don't tell anybody what to do. We do establish standards. For example, until I became mayor, we had gone years where city employees had not had annual reviews. It's inconceivable that you could have a department head like the police chief not have an annual review. Anyone from the public sector would expect that your paper would be graded on a yearly basis. As elected officials, our paper is graded on a semi-annual or a biannual basis. But we were not conducting performance reviews. Those are the kinds of guidance, the kinds of things that you have to spend extra time on. At least those things are now in place. And you still have to do the outreach. There are 2 county commissioners, both Democrat. There are 2 state representatives, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, and there's 1 state senator, and she's a Republican. And you have to go down there and have your voice heard, because when we're testifying in front of those bills, the only elected official in the room was the mayor of Lakeway, not the mayor of Round Rock, not the mayor of Cedar Park. Nobody else was speaking up for the small towns of western Travis County, except for the mayor of Lakeway, under the adoption that we had at a prior meeting that said we would fight every bill challenging an attack on a home rule city.
Does anybody else have any questions they want to submit? I'm gonna yeah. Okay. Ron, if you'll go first. People have been speaking a lot about the founders of Lakeway and how they set up our idyllic community. To hold our community leaders and employees to a higher standard than other cities, the Lakeway founders saw fit to create our own code of ethics and the board of ethics to ensure those higher standards were met and maintained. If you are elected as Lakeway's mayor, will you continue to support both Lakeway's code of ethics and the board of ethics? And you serve on that. Go ahead and your answer, explain.
Yeah, I serve on the ethics committee. You know, the thing I do agree with, Tom, is that we have an extremely watered down ethics committee. And, if it's going to be relevant, it should serve a purpose. Its current purpose, is limited to a donation of $50. But it's a way for people like Tom to try to hold our low-level bureaucrats, their family, their spouse, and their children to a statute. And I don't support that. And I don't support using ordinances in that way. But I do support ethics. I do support a city participating in ethics. I just don't support a provision of the ethics I would take into account low-level bureaucrats and their wives and their children, or husbands.
So can you give us an example, 1 or 2 examples of something you would add to the code of ethics? Because a year or so ago, we had a council member write a letter to the Lake Travis ISD on city letterhead, as if she was representing the city or the entire council, when really it was in her individual capacity. And I don't exactly know what happened, how that eventually panned out, but do you think there's a place for ethics? Is there an ordinance that you're on that committee, so you know more about it than I do. How would you strengthen it?
The state of Texas and home rule cities, we follow the state, and it's got some pretty established ethics guidelines. I couldn't comment on a letter that somebody wrote without, understanding the full context of it. Naturally, we expect our employees and our officials to behave and respond ethically to situations. And you know, having the council opine on ethics or the statute is something that I would gladly participate in. But you know, bringing my personality and my objective positions into it, you know, I'm 1/7 of a potential vote. So I'd work hard with our council to evaluate the ethics and look at it in contextually with the benefit of the residents in mind.
Okay, so can you think of one example that you would add to strengthen our current ethics?
No. I'm not gonna, you know, opine on something like that yet. I mean, there's things that, you know, we need to look at the ethics and make sure that, you know, we all agree on the direction it takes.
Okay.
Okay, well, to the specific example you cited, former council member Higginbotham addressed a letter to the Lake Travis Independent School District trustees on city letterhead. So ordinarily the use of city letterhead is reserved for the office of the mayor. And although any council member can issue paper under the letterhead, it generally is only done after the council has taken a vote on the subject. So no vote was taken by council on school district masks. And so there was an ethical complaint made that she had misrepresented the city council in doing so. Now, I write letters on letterhead every week to elected officials, to successful soccer teams on their victory, to Boy Scouts, to elementary schools for taking participation in Good Government Day. Those are unofficial positions of the city, and they are an acceptable use of the mayor's office as the ceremonial head of government. Now, it's not, the complaint that was alleged was not unreasonable in that using city letterhead and representing that it was a council issue as opposed to an individual issue was not correct. It wasn't the right thing to do. Whether or not you agree or disagree with that assertion, there's nothing in the current code that would prevent that. So you have to be very careful. For example, when I go to the legislature, I have to say on certain bills, I could not talk against it. I could only talk on it because we had not formally addressed that subject. But I would see that in terms of our ethics, I think that the way that we watered down the ethics deal was terrible. So, and just as a clarification, there isn't a $50 threshold. You can give any amount of money to any city employee at any time, and they don't have to report it to the city government. You can gift at large, gift early, gift often, whatever you want. I think that lack of transparency is an incredibly bad decision to have removed that provision. If you want to say you can not limit the gifts or however you want to do it, that's the biggest problem. I mean, in 2018, the former police chief was asked for relief from the city ethics ordinance. And he applied for that relief and it was denied. He wanted to get relief, that the police department was exempt. And after that relief was formally denied by the Board of Ethics, he returned to the department and told them that they were exempt anyway. That was a big issue when it was discovered. So I think that you just have to be prepared to reinforce some of the standards. I think that transparency is always the right thing. I think that when you get a gift as a city employee, if you're not disclosing it, you have a huge internal conflict of interest. You know, the biggest problem, the biggest scandal in this nature recently was about building inspections down in San Antonio, where building inspectors were showing up and there were cash cards inside the permit applications and the review. And it was clear how people got passed. I mean, you know, that's just one of those things that happens in life, folks. And the fact that we turned a blind eye to that formally, I think is a mistake, and transparency dictates that we revisit that, and I would certainly want to in the next council.
So speaking of these letters, are these, would you be willing to, there's a city website. Are your letters posted for the public to see? Just curious.
No, but they could be. There's just the office, the office of the mayor issues letters to different folks, and different times. It's like, you get a call. This is the female 11 to 13 softball team that won all state in this league. Can you send them a congratulatory note? And those are the kinds of things that are there. I mean, they're fun, and the community expects that if you reach out to the mayor, you'll get that. And I write them. I mean, it's just like the proclamations. We just did, the last proclamation was for Corporal Alan Babin Jr. That proclamation was personally written by me and no one else. So that's where, sometimes it is a me thing, Ron. And that's what you do. So.
Okay, I'm out of questions, so I'd like to get, unless anybody has one, I'd like to give both of you, a few minutes. Don't write a novel. 3 or 4 minutes, and tell us why we should vote for you. And you can go first.
Okay. Well, the answer is fairly simple. And this is the same as the introductory statement. My name's Tom Kilgore. I am your mayor. I have been your mayor for 23 months. My slogan is promises made, promises kept, more to do. When I came into office, I said we were going to get roads built. Everyone sees Main Street being built. There are lots of city officials that sit in this room who could not get Main Street built. It's built. I said we were going to improve our roads, and we passed a transportation bond for $17.8 million at a 2-to-1 ratio, which was a huge vote of confidence in your city council. I said we would have a reverse 911 system, and we have the Voyant Alert system. I said we would make sure that we were able to work with our community partners, and we have a great relationship with the Village of the Hills and the City of BK, Lake Travis Fire and Rescue. And despite all of the up and down with the school district, we have a very good relationship. They are our largest community partner. And there was nothing but a good time had by all when we had the orchestral concert this last Saturday. So the reason is, I came in and I said, I'm going to do these things, and I've just made a whole series of new promises about developing our parklands, becoming more transparent, furthering, one of the things I also ran on was senior exemptions from property taxes for our senior citizens. We used to be at $5,000, now we're at $25,000. So everything I said I was going to get done, we got done. But there's still more work to do. The biggest thing in front of us is the 620 expansion. That has to be controlled, regulated, and make sure that we do exactly the right thing, not in terms of the expansion, but in terms of making sure that these businesses here at this shopping center and the ones on the other side of the street have the proper zoning to redevelop their property and stay in business when that road is a concrete hell. And that's what we're going to do. And at this point in time, I think it would be extremely a poor choice to change leadership when we are exactly on the right course for what we're doing. We are exactly at the right place, and you have a great city council that's highly performing. And for that, I would ask for your vote for re-election, either during early voting starting April 24th or on May 6th. And I remain our Lakeway Mayor, Tom Kilgore. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. As a city, we should be meeting the challenges of our growth issues. Our city staff and council should not be mired down in changing city ordinances. We need to be helping citizens meet their current challenges as they face as our community continues to grow. Our government should be a resource for its citizens and not a burden. We need to have a cooperative relationship with TxDOT. We need to mitigate against the hardships of construction on our local businesses. Cooperation is the key, and I'm the guy to bring cooperation back into the equation. I want to work with the LTISD superintendent to ensure that millions of school tax dollars aren't spent on projects to be ultimately denied by our city council. I want to ensure that the $25,000 position that Tom just mentioned for our seniors is looked at and addressed, and potentially we could freeze their property tax value so we're not costing our seniors out of their homes. Right? I want to bring volunteerism back to Lakeway. We have so many residents across the city that want to engage in active volunteerism. I want to broaden that position and I want to amplify it. You know, I'm Ron Cooper, and I'm humbly requesting that you consider me for your next mayor. And I want to work hard to ensure that everybody and every voice is heard. And I want to work hard for you in the next 2 years. Thank you.
All right. Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, we are gonna take like a 5-minute break. There's bathrooms down the hall, and if the floor can,